welcome to today's Halloween Bash Masterclass titled Supernatural Iceland, the Tale of Bard, the God of Snowfell, with Irina-Maria Manea. This is the fourth event for this year's Halloween Bash. We've already had a panel discussion, a masterclass, and a book club. So if you missed those, you can find them on our YouTube channel. Firstly, what is SASA? SASA stands for Save Ancient Studies Alliance. It works to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work towards our goal of inspiring a wide inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. You can find us on all major social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn by just looking up Save Ancient Studies. A few housekeeping rules before we get started. Please be kind and respectful. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. SASA live events are live streamed on Twitch as well as Facebook and YouTube. They are recorded and archived and posted on those platforms. And most importantly, have fun. If you enjoy our events, please consider becoming a supporter of SASA. You can join the community through a monthly donation of as little as $5 a month. You can also subscribe to our Twitch for $5 a month. By donating, you get access to tiered perks like discounts on our bazaar, access to exclusive content, and more. Thank you again, and I'll now hand it over to Irina.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here as always. So today I am going to talk to you about a very interesting story, Bárðar saga Snaefellsáss. That would be the modern Icelandic pronunciation. If you prefer the medieval pronunciation, that would be Bárðar saga Snaefellsáss, with Ós meaning God, plural Esir. But this time we're not referring to a God as you would imagine it as a divine being, but rather to a guardian spirit. And we're talking about a guardian spirit from a very particular region of Iceland, the peninsula of Snæfell. So what you can see here in the picture to the left, this is a modern sculpture or statue. It depicts this half troll called Bárðar, and it dates back to 1978. So he is a protector of the peninsula nowadays as well. So he is still preserved in folklore, but the stories about him date back to the 14th century. So I'm going to try to summarize the story for you, highlighting the most important aspects, and then we can also talk a little bit about this more general image of the troll and what we can make of the story in general, how we can interpret it. So first of all, a little bit about the geographic location. So broadly speaking, this is the peninsula of Snæfell. So it is located in Western Iceland, and you can find a lot of interesting things here. You can visit, for example, the historic village of Atlastapi. You can also see a lot of interesting places such as the Black Church, the Búðakirkja. Of course, perhaps the most famous example is the mountain Kirkjufell, where they also filmed a couple of episodes from Game of Thrones, I suppose. And yeah, you can also admire the seals on Ytri Tunga. So it's definitely a place worth visiting. And generally speaking, the landscape itself, I think, encouraged us to develop all these legends and myths surrounding the region. So, Bárðar saga Snaefellsáss is a late saga, so it dates back to the 14th century, and we generally refer to these sagas with the term post-classical sagas. So it is still a family sagas, so it depicts events dating back to the settlement period, so the 9th, 10th century. It depicts also revenge tales with feuds and different families involved in these feuds. But it also has, let's say, a little more fiction than the traditional historical family sagas, although that is quite problematic in itself, because if you read the Icelandic sagas, even the more historical ones such as Njál Saga or Laxdœla Saga, you're still going to find a lot of supernatural and paranormal elements, because this division is something that is post-medieval. Yeah, so if we speak about family sagas or legendary sagas or chivalric sagas, yeah, there are a couple of thematic differences, but these would have been categories that we developed afterwards. So I'm not very sure whether the author writing the saga would have been aware of that genre division, because he has both historical elements and what we, from a contemporary perspective, might deem fictional elements. However, the boundaries between them would have been extremely vague. So a lot of what people in the medieval times would have regarded as history would not classify as such nowadays. All right, so like I said, this is set in the landscapes, the preternatural landscapes of Snaefellsnes in western Iceland, and it tells the tale of not only the ancient guardian spirit known as Bárðar, but also his son. So the second half of the saga actually deals with the deeds of his son, called Gestur. The saga does have a fascination with transgressive characters, because our hero is half a troll. Now, when we use this term troll in this particular context, don't imagine those greenish monsters from later 19th century folklore, because that is not the case. Troll is a term used in medieval sagas to designate a lot of beings. So troll is also a term used to designate ghosts, for example, or revenants, or generally speaking, all kinds of beings that have to do a little bit with magic, sorcery, or shape shifting. So if we are to define the saga with a term, I think it is safe to call it a hybrid, because, like I said, it has a lot of elements, trying to historicize the story. So the theme of conversion plays a vital part, as well as the theme of the settlement of Iceland. But then again, we also have all kinds of imaginings and fabrications and so on, putting it rather into this realm of the legendary. And what's interesting about it is that it does seem to be a little playful, a little ludic in terms of how it treats its protagonists and the stories they are involved in. So we do have these core themes which are very important for Icelandic identity, but then again we have the main protagonists who are not people, they're not humans, they're a clan of heathens of monstrous descent. So we can interpret it in a way as this sort of like playful reinterpretation of the more classical sagas, so to speak. So the chapters 1 to 11 tell about Bárðar's origins, his wanderings, and his transformation into this sort of like guardian of the peninsula, a godly entity coming to aid people in need. So in the first chapter, we find information regarding his lineage. His father is called Dumb. He is a semi-divine ruler. He is also descended from a family of giants and trolls, and he married the largest of all women, as depicted in the saga, a woman called Mjöll, which literally means flower. He is described, if you look at the description, you're going to see that he's not really described as a troll, what you would imagine as being a troll, because he's described as being this very handsome character. So I quote here, "Þessi svein var bæði mikil og væn at sjó, at menn þóttust engan yngri karlmann set hafa." So this boy was both tall and very good looking, and everyone thought that they had never seen a better looking boy. Interesting about him is the fact that he is sent to be fostered by Dofri, and Dofri is also described as being this mountain dweller. Now, when we find such descriptions, we generally associate that with a realm of chaos, but also a realm of knowledge that needs to be accessed. And it is described indeed that Bárðar learns a lot from this character, from Dofri. He gets trained in all sorts of skills, such as genealogy, fighting, so magic, and ancient law. It is also said that he ends up marrying his daughter, Flaumgerð, and then a second marriage with Hertrud, and he has a lot of daughters with both women. It is then told in the story, and this is very interesting because it depicts a common theme that you'll find in a lot of Icelandic tales. It is told that he was dissatisfied with the way Harald Fairhair was trying to impose taxes on everyone, and then he, with his brother, they decide together, alongside a couple of other farmers, to move to Iceland. So this is a recurring theme. This general stereotype of Harald Fairhair being this evil king trying to tax everyone, and then we have these like independent mind people who try to go to Iceland as a way of asserting their freedom and trying to build something for themselves. Now, this is reflective, especially of what happens in Iceland in the 13th century, actually, which is that the Icelandic community lost its independence and got ruled by Norway from that point on, so mid 13th century. And since the saga is written in the 14th century, we can assume that this was still very much alive in collective memory at that point. So they moved to Iceland. And if you look at the source called the Saga map, you're also going to find the locations where they got settled. So in this green, this blue point shows where Bárðar got settled. It had a settlement at a place called Laugarbrekka or Igarbrekka, and it is also said that he is involved in some kind of pagan ritual, some sacrifices for fortune telling at Trollkirkja, so the Trollish church, which would have been some sort of cave. Anyway, they afterwards use another cave to hold council, and this is called the Echoing Cave, the Songhellir. So they really settle in this landscape, and they try to make it their own. And then a lot of paranormal things start happening. Like, for example, two people from their party, they end up turning into trolls, and then they start competing with the settlers for resources. There is one episode, for example, when they are showed scavenging a dead whale, and that's the point where Bárðar engages with these people and defeats them. A very decisive moment from the story involves a family tragedy, so a conflict between Bárðar and his brother Thorkel, and it's quite devastating what happens, because we have a description of a game between the sons of Thorkel and Helga, who is the daughter of Bárðar, and they accidentally end up sending her on a piece of ice, which apparently floats all the way to Greenland, and she is discovered by none other than Eric the Red, and she does play an important part in some happenings in Greenland as well. So she apparently gets attached to this man called Skeggi, and we have a couple of episodes where the saga describes all these evil spirits coming to attack the household, and she plays a very important part in fending off these evil spirits. So we see here trollish heritage could also be useful if you wanted to battle these supernatural spirits. Bárðar is very affected by this whole story, and he does effect a quite gruesome revenge, which is that he throws his own nephews into ravines. So both of his nephews die because of him, and the saga also tries to explain some aspects of some elements of the landscape by using this story. And this is again something you see happening recurrently in the saga and in many other sagas, which is trying to explain elements of the landscape by using that sort of episode. So the landscape in itself is a character. We can consider it a character, and it's very important for like situating this whole story historically speaking, and it's a great opportunity for showing how these places got their names. So from a toponymical point of view. Well, this does not end well, because he engages in a fight with his brother afterwards. eventually they come to terms, but this takes a very deep toll on Bárðar, who apparently cannot function very well in the land of humans afterwards. So in chapter 6, it is said han gerðis bæði þögul og illur viðskiptis. So he got very nasty and difficult to deal with, which leads to his decision of retreating to the glacier to Snæfell. Ik ser það, segir hann, að sakir ettar minnar og karma stóra ber ek ekki náttúru við altíðjumanna og því mun ek leita mér nokkra annara róða. So I can see, he said, that because of my kin, so his trollish clan, and terrible sorrow, so what happened with his brother and nephews, I am not able to deal with normal people, and that is why I need to find another path for myself. So he essentially goes away, vanishes into this glacial cap, and afterwards he becomes sort of like this character in the background that people seem to trust and summon whenever they get into trouble themselves. But then the episodes that we have in the sagas, they seem to be like self-contained stories. So he's just a figure floating about, kind of like unifying these stories, but these stories could function to some extent without him as well. All right, and we do have episodes where he actually does get people out of trouble after they start worshiping him, and we also have an interesting episode where he eventually gets hold of his daughter, because Helga goes with this man Skeggi first to Norway, but then they come back to Iceland, where he also had a farm. But Helga is not really that thrilled at this possibility of hanging out with her father, so she also disappears. So again, you can see the trollish heritage working in her case as well. So Thidis hvorki nólega menn ne fenað eða herbergi. So it is said that she could not stay near men nor beast or in lodging, so she is better off by herself. So she cannot stand the presence of men. We have a couple of examples showing that. She does get involved in the story later on when she ends up fostering her half brother. We have a character called Ingjald, and Ingjald is one of the people who summons Bárðar to help him, because he is pestered by a troll woman who prevents him from making the most of his fishing expeditions, and she tries to lure him into the open sea, telling him that she's going to make up for whatever he lost because of her. But then again, he gets involved in this like weather and storm, and he nearly dies. We have another interesting apparition in this episode, which is a figure called Grimr. Grimr is, generally speaking, a name we find in association with Odin, but in this case, the saga tells us it is likely that we are dealing with Thor. So we can see here that definitely the author had some sort of ideas about these ancient mythological figures and happenings, but he is offering his own twist on the story. Grimr in the guise of Thor, or Thor in the guise of Grimr, does not help Ingjaldr. It is Bárðar who helps Ingjaldr, because he shows up on his own boat. He's described as being this man in a grey cowl with a rope of hide around his waist, so that would have been sort of like his stereotypical appearance, and he does help Ingjald get away alive from the storm. It's not only Ingjald he helps. We have an example of another farmer called Thorir. Thorir is very upset because there is this troll woman who keeps pestering his livestock, and then again he invokes Bárðar, and he does get the help he needs. Now, Bárðar is also involved in two other interesting episodes involving teaching this time. So he essentially follows in the footsteps of his own troll teacher, Dovri, and he teaches law to a character called Odr after inviting him to a Yule feast. And we have rather lengthy description there about how he got into a little bit of trouble trying to find this Yule feast as part of the quest. But then when he does that, eventually Other teaches him law. And the other character he teaches law to, and also genealogy. So these would have been two essential skills to have in medieval Iceland. It was very important for medieval Icelanders to get hold of their ancestors, and we see this tension all throughout Icelandic literature, like how to integrate the ancestors, especially the heathen ones, how to integrate them into this Christian past, and this is something that it is also revealed here. So he teaches genealogy to a character called Eiður, who is the son of Skeggi, the partner of Helga, but he does so disguised as a character called Gestur, which essentially means guest. And on that occasion, he also seduces the sister of Eid by the name of Thordis. And this is the point where his son Gestur gets into the story. So he has a son with this character Thordis, and Gestur is fostered by Helga, his sister. Then Helga comes back and gives him to his mother, but then Gestur goes away again to meet his father, who essentially teaches him all these skills, which are extremely important, so that Gest turns into this great hero. Yeah. So speaking of the description, how Bárðar is presented in the story, I can quote here a little bit from chapter 9. Oft sveimaði Bárðar landið og kom víða fram. Var hann svo oft að búinn að hann var í grómkúfli og svardreip sig, klafarkerlingu í hendi og í fjaðurbrotlangan og digran, nauti hann og hans jafnan, hann gekk jökla. So he often wandered around the country, appearing far and wide. He was usually clad in a grey cowl with a walrus-hide robe around him and a cleft staff in his hand with a long and thick gaff. He often made use of it when traveling the glaciers. So I don't know if Gandalf was influenced particularly by this character, but Tolkien, when writing Lord of the Rings, I'm very sure that he had Bárðar in his mind as well when concocting the character. Okay, so moving on to the adventures of Gestur. Gestur has essentially three important adventures, with the third one being the most important one in his becoming, because this is the one that deals with the conversion. But first of all, he is involved in a revenge tale involving his brothers as well, his half brothers. The saga tells us about a quarrel at a Yule feast. The Yule feast seems to have been something very much beloved by the troll families, because they keep on organizing them on the glacier or under the glacier. So at one of these feasts, we have a description of a game of skin throwing, and there are a lot of ogres and trolls taking part in these games, and one of them is called Kolbjorn. And Kolbjorn at some point tries to leap forward to Gestur's father, so to Bárðar, but Gestur tries to prevent his father from being hurt by Kolbjorn, so he pushes him in a way that he ends up on the floor breaking his nose, and he's very disturbed by this happening, so he is going to try to avenge this. Now, the context of his vengeance has to do with hiding sheep from sight, and this is something, again, sort of like stereotypical, this idea of trolls being these agents of chaos who can not only cause harm but also cause things to disappear. And this is what happens here. So we have Thorbjorn, so that would be Thord's future husband, who has a farm with a lot of sheep, and at some point they get hidden from sight by trolls, and he is told that only his sons by the names of Thorden and Thorvald have the power to lift the curse, and they go about wandering, trying to figure it out, and they eventually encounter this troll called Kolbjorn, and Kolbjorn tries to play a trick on them by promising his daughter Solrun, who is actually a kidnapped woman, if they attend the wedding feast. So the daughter is promised to Thord. And At this point, when the two brothers enter a cave in this region of Snæfell, they also encounter Guest, who is joined by his faithful dog Snoti, and they also fight Soldrun somewhere deep in the tunnel, hidden, and she is released and reveals the plans of vengeance of Kolbjorn, and they actually manage to prevent it because upon organizing this grand feast, Gester manages to behead most of the rock dwellers following a great drinking party. But then they are also pursued by a smaller group, Kolbjorn's assistants, so to speak, including his sorceress mother. But they again managed to defeat them, also with this with the help of his dog Snotty, who actually defeats this great sorceress who is Kolbjorn's mother. So everyone is safe, and Guest saves Thor's life in this context, and he also reveals the fact that they are brothers. So this would be the first adventure of Gester. Now, we do have what I consider to be perhaps the most important episode of the saga, involving Gesters at the court of King Olaf Tryggvason, who was one of the Christianizing kings of Norway. Now, this is something that you are going to see in a lot of sagas, this idea of the Norwegian king inviting an Icelandic youth at the court and trying to persuade him to work for him, like be in his service, pledge allegiance to him, and with this occasion also try to convert him. And he does so at the beginning, but then he realizes how independently minded he was, and what spiritual power he had, and he ends up believing that he's going to convert on his own terms, and he gives up doing so. Gester explains his reluctance by saying "Alls ekki mer at låta þá trú sem hinir fyrir frændur mínir hafa haft. Það hugboð mitt ef ek læt það sitt að ek muna ekki leggi lifa." So he says, "I'm not of mind to renounce the faith of my kinsmen, that my kinsmen held before me. I have the feeling that if I renounce my faith, these customs, I will not have long to live." So this is a prophecy he utters for himself, and prophecies generally come true in Icelandic sagas. So we have prophetic dreams quite often as well. So Bárð, for example, also has a sort of prophetic dream at the very beginning when he is in the service of the troll Dofri. He also dreams about the troll actually training the future king Harald Fairhair. So this is also very interesting because this does not diminish the power of the story, and it's not really a spoiler. I mean, it is a spoiler, but it does not prevent you from reading the story. It would have been something that people would have actually enjoyed at the time. So we have this episode with Olaf Tryggvason trying to convert Gester, but he doesn't want to do so. And then we move on to the other episode, which involves the mound breaking. So this is something extraordinary. It's a very descriptive episode, and I really do enjoy these episodes in the sagas. So not those where revenants or ghosts come back and haunt communities because they want something from you, or because they are somehow connected to that community still, or to some kinsman, but the ones where we have heroes actively seeking up the past, because we have the examples of these ancient kings. In our case, we have King Ragnar, an ancient king of Helluland, as he is described in the saga, posing a challenge for these heroes and offering them an opportunity to prove what they have become, to go on a quest and to highlight their heroism. And this is exactly what happens here. So we have, again, this very liminal a chronotype of the Yule feast. These kind of magical encounters usually happen on Yule. So we have this ancient king coming to the hall and challenging the men to take the treasures from him if they can. So Olaf Tryggvason afterwards tells Gester that this would be a great opportunity to prove what sort of hero he is, and he gives him some sort of aid to go with him on the quest, both objects and people. So he gives him, for example, 40 pairs of iron shoes, as well as a character, Jostein, who is a priest, and he's not really that welcome by Gester, who prefers to take with him two magicians. They all go together, but we have this tension between, the ancient faith and the new faith, and this whole challenge of how to integrate both worlds into the same story. So we have the description of the journey afterwards. They travel to Greenland, and when they reach an isolated island off the coast of Greenland, where the mound is situated, we have a lot of marvels going on, a lot of magical happenings. The earth swallows the two magicians, for example, and then the priest seems to become the main character, because he is actually the one fending off the evil, represented particularly by a bull. Then there is an episode where they cross a lava field, and when Gester actually helps the priest do so. And then there's also a sequence of all kinds of marvels and apparitions at the tombs, at the mound, where the priest gets involved a lot, in the sense that he sees all these apparitions and evil spirits, but then he is undeterred in his faith, and he manages to resist the temptation to leave the mound, and he just stays there and faces evil head on, so that Gester can eventually go down into the mound. He does so. He also has a candle, which seems to help quite a lot, because it is the candle that lights itself. And he decapitates a bunch of people that he encounters on the ship of the ancient king of Ragnar. And then he even manages to convince this ancient king to give him his helmet, and we understand from the saga that this has to do with the power of this candle, but in the end, the candle, well, it doesn't work any longer, and Gester is forced to face Ragnar, to wrestle him, and he is completely overcome. So this is a vital point where he summons his father, Bárðar, the guardian spirit. But the summoning is futile, and this shows that heathen beliefs no longer function, or at least in the narrative, the way things are presented, it is shown that the ancient past doesn't really have any power any longer. So Bárðar is essentially useless in the story. And then Gester realizes that he needs to make a different kind of pact. So he pledges to take the Christian faith if he gets out of this alive. And then we have this spectacular image of King Ólafur Tryggvason entering the mound, surrounded by light, and Ragnar is defeated immediately. So the power of Christianity seems to have overcome. Now you might think, all good and well, Gester accepted Christianity, so this is the path towards the new world, and he is alive and well and becomes fully integrated into this new world. But this is not what happens. Because his father Bárðar actually curses him. He is very unhappy with his decision of denouncing paganism and converting. And when he shows up to him, he is anything but conciliating. So, hina hestu nótt eftir en Gestur var skírður, dreymdi hann að Bárðar faðir sinn kæmi til hans og mældi. Illa hefur þú gert, þú hefur lotið trú þína. Þó langveðgar þínir hafa haft, og lotið þú þig til síðaskipti sakir lítil mennsku, og fyrir það skal þú missa bæði augu þín. Tók Bárðar þó að augum hans heldur ótilmega og hvori síðan. Eftir þetta gestur vaknaði hefur hann tekið augnaverk svo strangan að hið sama dag sprungu þá út bæði. Síðan annaðist gestur í hvíta voðum. So what happens here is that the next night after Gestur is baptized, he dreams, again prophetically, that his father comes to him and announces a poor deed you've done, renouncing your faith and that of your forefathers and allowing yourself to be forced to change your beliefs for lack of character, so cowardice. For doing so, you shall lose both your eyes. Bárð then placed his hands on Gest's eyes more than a little roughly, afterwards disappeared. When Gest awoke, he had such a horrible pain in his eyes that they burst out the same day. So a pretty horrific image. Afterwards, he died, still in his baptismal clothes. So this story does not have a happy ending, and there is a reason for that, actually. The reason is that Gest still belongs to this trollish past that needs to be defeated, or at least in the kind of narrative, the concept, the conceptual framework of this particular author. So if you want to make sense of Bárðar, well, the troll as a character, as a vague character in Icelandic sagas, an ambiguous character, is linked to a sphere of wilderness, a sphere related to the earth, iconic sphere, not necessarily chaos, but something liminal. He's in a liminal space, and if you want to interpret it from a theological point of view, then it would be the liminal space between heathenism and Christianity. Trolls are also associated with sorcery and magical abilities, also with shape-shifting, and they play an important part in a lot of adventures, sometimes comical adventures, but here what we can see in Bárðar saga is something quite unique in Icelandic literature, because this is actually a main character. He is a mixed character, a blending, and he aligns very much to the concept of the monster as a creature policing the boundaries between the possible and the impossible. So between the historical and the fictitious, between what we can imagine and the factual. So he's a blending who embraces his heritage and makes good use of it. And we also find throughout the saga this pattern of traveling to the mountains and then dwelling in the mountains. So the mountains again are also this sort of like liminal space, a space with hidden knowledge, a space where you could get initiated, where you can gain experience. Bárðar also has a couple of interesting Odinic traits. So we have already seen in the way he is described when traveling and when being summoned, and his grey clothing and the staff, the fact that he shares knowledge with others. These are Odinic traits. Now, the author might have had in his source of inspiration such mythological stories, or these would have been something that he picked up from other texts, or maybe they were fossilized memories of the ancient past. So a very interesting character who is both historically anchored in Icelandic in the Icelandic narrative, national narrative. I mean here the story of the settlement, for example, but he's also stuck in a heathen otherness that is difficult to cope with. The historical anchoring happens a lot by means of referencing the Book of Settlements. So the Book of Settlements is a work where we have a lot of descriptions about what settlers came to Iceland and what places they managed to settle. So we have some passages in Bárðar saga where we have like a direct reference to the Book of Settlements. So by using that kind of passage, the author tries to lend us the impression of historicity. But then again, there are also these paranormal elements being very well integrated into the saga, and essentially Bárðar, although he seems to integrate very well in this world of the humans, he is still a heathen, he is still trollish, and in the end, he chooses to become isolated himself, but we are not rid of him completely, because he still remains floating in the background, and at the end of the saga, as we have already seen, he does enact a great deal of his ancient powers because he provokes the death of his own son. So his ancestry, we can say, is suspended in a deep past the author is experiencing or experimenting with, and the character obtains the status of, first of all, a landvatter, so sort of like a natural spirit, and that is going to be preserved in later folklore as well. If we are to analyze the fate of his son, the fate of Gestur, well, here we have narrative, sort of like historical nucleus to anchor the story in the primary world, which would be the relationship between a Norwegian ruler and an Icelandic youth, which would have posed a lot of opportunity, but at the same time, a lot of tension. And secondly, we have the clash of beliefs, so the clash between the ancestral heathen powers and gods and supernatural, generally speaking, and the new world of Christianity, so the new faith, which is also very much linked to more order and structure, and also law and political power as well. Now, Gestur has a quest which is quite similar to chivalric tales, the so-called Riddarasögur, which are basically reworkings of continental chivalric tales. And it can be interpreted from these two perspectives. So on the one hand, he is this sort of like ancient pagan hero, but at the same time, he is more of a knight, especially if we look at the episode with the mound dweller. This has been theorized as a story called Pagan Contact Story, or Thatr. Thatr is a sort of like short story, a short saga. Pagan Contact meaning not only a story dealing with the problems and challenges of conversion, but a story with supernatural happenings enabling Christians to access this distant history. And in this case, we have them very well symbolized by these otherworldly protagonists, so by Bárðar and his son Gestur. They both show an uneasiness in this new Christian human world, and this is seen quite brutally in the fate of Gestur, in the sense that he does adapt in the end. So he's unwilling to do so at the beginning because he refuses Olaf Tryggvason's proposal, but at the end he does accept Christianity. Nevertheless, he still pertains to this ancient world which needs to perish, so that the new age of order, faith, law, and especially Norwegian rule can dominate and replace it. So I think the story is very interesting from the point of view of both history and cultural memory. From several points of view. So first of all, we have apparently a very dynamic social landscape where multiple identities coexist and challenge each other. So we have seen the episode with a bit of a feud between Bárðar and his brother. We have also seen a lot of places which are explained in terms of the actions of the hero. So the idea of toponymy. And we also have a lot of mixing up between realism and magical realism, if I might reuse this term, although it is a bit anachronistic in the sense that the division between history and fiction would have been extremely ambiguous, at least for an Icelandic author writing in the 13th and the 14th century. There would have been a lot of inspiration from oral and written traditions. There are a couple of sagas which are similar, more or less, in terms of the way they present conversion. Although this story does seem to be a little more playful and less dramatic. I'm thinking here of a story called Sorlathatar, for example, where we have the character of Odin. He really bemoans this death of the ancient world, and it seems a little more dramatic in tone than Bárðar saga, which seems a little more burlesque in tone. So we have a hybrid story. There are a lot of sources of inspiration, a lot of traditions blending together in a story where we have as a protagonist a troll or a trollish clan, and this clan participates in the conventions of Icelandic society, but we do get the impression that whatever they do, they tend to become alienated one way or another. So not only Bárðar and Gestur, but also Helga, for example, who was the daughter of Bárðar and perhaps the most important female character of the story. In her case, like, she chooses isolation by herself. So one way or another, we do get this impression that these characters cannot really function that well in this human world. And if you look at the becoming of Bárðar, you're going to notice that he's becoming gradually dislocated from the audience. So in the first chapters, he seemed like this very real character, like very engaged in his world. But then when he travels to the glacier and when he becomes isolated, he sort of like becomes this elusive presence. Like, people start worshiping him. He becomes this guardian spirit. He's still very much involved in the world of the humans, but at the same time, he's really not, because he's there in the background somewhere. So he's there to be worshipped, but he's really not completely a part of this world. We cannot say he's completely isolated either, because in the story he seems to be functioning as a sort of unifying symbol, unifying all these episodes in the sagas, in the saga. But then again, also a unifying symbol for this regional history of Snæfell, and this is also seen nowadays because the character is still considered an important character pertaining to this regional history. So I think in a way, Bárðar did survive the conversion and other challenges that he faced. So the story in itself, like I said, remains quite playful, quite ludic. It's not really that serious compared to other sagas, and we do get the impression that even the theological preoccupations with the conversion are not really that deep if we compare it to other sources. If we compare the tensions in Njol Saga, for example, and similar stories. But then again, the author, it's my understanding that he's really trying to blend all these traditions together, and some of them are inverted, because not only because you have a troll or a trollish clan as the main character, but also because at the end of the story you actually have a heathen character uttering a curse instead of the more logical expectation of having a Christian character uttering that curse. So I think the saga is useful to reflect the tensions in society, so the 13th, 14th century, because we have all these memories about the Norwegian dominance, about the loss of independence, about this deep transformation of conversion which happened around the year 1000. We have these fossilized memories of ancient gods and ancient spirits lingering in the background. And I think Bárðar, as well as his son, and generally speaking, all the characters from the saga do a very good job in showing how deeply linked these worlds would have been. So I hope I could encourage you to read the story for yourselves. And yeah, it's a very interesting one because, like I said, it has this sort of like boundary presence between a traditional family saga and a legendary saga. It has a lot of paranormal, a lot of supernatural. So I think it is the appropriate reading for a Halloween night.
Thank you so much, Irina. As always, the masterclass was very enlightening and amazing. Again, please support our Halloween bash if you can, and you can scan the QR code on the right side of your screen to donate. Irina has done various other masterclasses with Sasa, which are posted on our channel. She also runs a YouTube channel for historical education in all things Viking and occasionally Germanic philology, Scandinavian and German culture. You can scan this QR code to check her account out. Thank you again for watching, and we will be
Thank you
back
so
with
much.
other live events. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and happy Halloween.